It's This is Hannibal here from HannibalTV.com, and about to join me is a very interesting woman. She's an expert in quantum healing, hypnosis. This is kind of a UFO related interview, by the way, for the UFO fans. It's not wrestling related. She's a master hypnotist. She knows all about Atlantis. She knows all about Egypt and even gives tours of Egypt, which I'm very curious to know more about. But how are you doing tonight?
Oh, great. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. And I understand you started off wanting to get into psychology. How did you end up interested in psychology, and how did you switch into hypnotherapy?
I know it was so different than what I wanted to do. I mean, I wanted to be a psychologist, so it's so far from where I ended up. And I got into psychology because I wanted to help myself. But when I got into the field after learning everything I learned in psychology and in college, when I got into the field before going to graduate school, I had an internship where my job was basically to counsel people and to give them their medications. And I felt as if everything I had learned in college was like a lie because I had learned so much in college and I thought, wow, I can't believe this is like the leading edge of thought. This is all we have to offer people that have mental illnesses or issues. They're just supposed to go on these heavy duty medications. And I never saw like any success stories. I never saw anyone get better. In fact, it was quite the opposite. I saw people just suffering and getting worse and worse. And it depended on how much medication they were on. And I just thought this isn't really working for people. I just thought there must be something better. So that's why I eventually got into hypnosis and I didn't become a psychologist. I quit that whole career after getting into the field. And that was just my own experience. It's not everybody's experience. But, and I'm not knocking that whole profession. It's just that I just thought that it was almost like putting a band aid on cancer by giving all these people, just medications to eradicate their symptoms. I wanted to get to the very root cause of their issues. And that's why I got into hypnosis. And I thought if people could get to the very root cause of their issues, and maybe they could actually heal themselves and it would be a lot better than just medicating them. So I became a master hypnotist in 2009. And essentially, in order to become a master hypnotist, I had to learn lose weight, hypnosis, quit smoking, and I had to do past life regressions. And it was obvious right away that there was something about the past life regression hypnosis technique that people would come in for just one session and they would actually start healing themselves. So I thought, wow, there must be something to this that actually works. And I wanted to help people and I wanted to do something that worked. So that's when I studied with Dr. Brian Weiss. He was my first teacher, and he really helped me learn a lot about past lives, about like other things in this universe. And I was really enjoying his method for many years until I felt like there was something missing in my life. I just couldn't put a finger on it. So I contacted a psychic actually, and she said, wow, this is the easiest psychic reading I've ever done. You're supposed to do this Dolores Cannon's method, and you're going to get really great at that method. You're going to be teaching it, and you're going to be writing books and speaking about your books all over the world. And I thought this was just such a terrible psychic reading because I would never like write books or I would never like teach it. I just thought she had me confused with someone else. So I didn't even look into this Dolores Cannon person until 6 months later. And sure enough, just like the psychic said, once I looked into this person, it was almost as if something clicked within me. And I did exactly what the psychic foretold. I worked my way up from the bottom level and then I became an instructor in it. I was traveling all over the world with Dolores Cannon's daughter and I was assisting her and teaching the classes. Then I wrote my books and I've been speaking about them all over the world. And that's essentially in a nutshell how I got into hypnosis. It was completely by accident. I never wanted to do anything like this. Growing up, I was very scientific and I was on the opposite side. I didn't believe in any of this stuff. I didn't believe in extraterrestrials. I didn't believe in past lives. So if you had told me when I was growing up that I would be doing this, I would not have believed you. I would have just thought there's no way.
Yeah, you're definitely on the other side now from what I've seen of you. What is the difference between quantum healing hypnosis and regular hypnotherapy?
So, regular past life regression hypnotherapy, the goal is really for the client to experience or remember a past life and then to see how that correlates to their current life. But it's different with quantum healing hypnosis technique that was developed by the late Dolores Cannon. The way it's different is that the main goal of the session is to access the client's higher self, which is actually the part of them that's connected to universal consciousness. So when you access this part of a person, you're essentially like communicating with God or source. And it's amazing because once you get that connection with a person, you can find out anything about them. You can find out where they've lived before. You can find out their true purpose, and they can even heal themselves. And that's why this method has gained so much popularity because people have healed themselves, and it's really miraculous. Just even finding out more about yourself and your true nature and what you're doing here. And I can find out anything. That's how I write my books because I can take a person, and it doesn't matter who they are. You can use anyone subconscious. And if you go deep enough within them and you access this part, you're actually accessing universal consciousness. So it doesn't matter who you use. And in that way, I can find out anything. And so it's so fun for me because I get to learn about all the secrets of the universe. And then the way that I differ or the way I work is that because I've always been such a doubter, I have to prove everything to myself first. I'm not one of those people that's really easily swayed. It has to be fully proven to me. So the way I work is that I have about 5 or 6 hypnosis subjects at any given time. And when I'm researching something, I will ask each one of my subjects deep under hypnosis when I communicate with their higher self these questions. And my subjects never meet one another. And I'm really careful to make sure I use hypnosis subjects that don't consciously know this information. Like I've used friends or even family members or people that I know, you know, don't know this information. And that's how I can feel like I'm validating the information because I check it amongst all these people that don't know one another and they never, meet or anything or talk about what I'm working on. And they have no idea what I'm working on. So when it's very consistent, I know that I can use that in my research and in my books. And that's essentially how I validate it. I don't just go by whatever is coming up in one session. I really try to make sure that I cross reference it.
How do you define higher self when you say you're communicating with these people through their higher selves?
So everybody has like a spirit team or like a part of themselves too that never fully incarnates into the physical vessel, into the body. So a lot of people locate it above their head, like above the crown chakra. It's actually connected to like God or source. And above your head is essentially like your soul. And that part that never fully comes into the physical body is the part that I'm speaking with. And this part is connected to everything else. So it's almost like you keep following a person up and you get to this universal consciousness. So essentially, I feel like I'm communicating with universal consciousness because that's why a lot of these energy healing techniques or different things people do energetically, it can affect people that excuse me, that aren't even in the room because you're essentially affecting the whole field. It really is true when they say we are all one because we really essentially are all one.
Now, you've had some past life regression hypnosis done by other people, I guess, because I've heard you say that you've experienced other lives. Could you tell us a bit about those?
Yeah. As I was working on uncovering all this information about Atlantis, I had a regression done to me during that time. And I guess you would say it's probably no surprise that I remembered a time in Atlantis, but my memory of that time was really kind of surprising and a little bit shocking because it was not what I expected. But I remembered being like a judge in Atlantis. So my job was essentially to decide who would stay and who would go during like a cataclysmic time in Atlantis. But the best part about my memories of Atlantis were my sandals. They were unbelievable. Have you ever ridden an electric bike? They were like an electric bike sandal. Like I was an older gentleman in my memories, and I used to walk around the inner ring, and it would take about 3.5 hours, kind of like that's how long it would take. But even though I was an older gentleman and my joints kind of hurt me, when I use these, oh, I don't know how they're not invented yet, but when I use these electric bike sandals, it would like work with the bottom of my feet, and it felt like something was pushing up on the bottom of my feet, and then it would propel like the the sandal would propel me, and I loved it. And I'm waiting for them to be invented, but I don't really know when that will happen. But it was pretty interesting to me just to see, you know, like what I had been told Atlantis looked like, but I got to see it firsthand. And I saw my law office where I worked, and there was this really interesting crystal that you see when you come into the law office. And they used crystals a lot for different purposes, but the one that was in the law office was to help people with clarity. It was actually interesting that they understood that certain crystals had different properties and that you could use them for certain things. But for the most part, they seem very scientific in Atlantis. And what I saw was that they were not very spiritual in the section, in the part, especially at the final days, the group that I was with.
So, were you interested in Atlantis prior to
No,
finding that out about yourself? No, you weren't?
no, no, not at all. And in fact, I wasn't an expert in Atlantis or anything like that. And I always really liked warm weather, and I thought that I moved to my house in the Florida Keys just because I like the warm weather. And it's funny because everybody can do this, but when you look back on your life, you can see how everything was so set up and everything was so meant to be. I was supposed to come here and live in the Florida Keys because I'm so close to where I died in that past life. And I came here to remember these things about Atlantis. Like I came here to do this. And I had no conscious memory of that. I had no idea why I moved here, but it was all meant to be. It was all important.
So, you say the sandals haven't been invented yet. We always think of Atlantis as something in the past, either a lost civilization or a civilization that may have been connected with aliens somehow. What could you tell us about what you know about Atlantis from your research?
Well, the founder of Atlantis seemed to have come from the Pleiades, or the most recent founder, because Atlantis spanned for thousands of years. But it appeared that my job or my role was to uncover and share the final days of Atlantis, or the final time period of Atlantis. And the founder of that most recent, what you would call the most recent Atlantis, was an extraterrestrial, and he crash landed in like the Utah basin, and their ship had a malfunctioning going on to it where the breathing mechanisms were failing, and so they had to land their ship, but they landed it in a quarry in Utah, and they were not able to salvage enough technology to communicate or to go back to their home planet. Instead, they figured that they had to make do and do the best that they could. But the founder of Atlantis did not want to stay where they are. He did not want like what they were doing, which was trying to integrate with the native population in that area. Instead, the founder of Atlantis took as many of the special crystals from the ship that were very powerful, and they were known to be red crystals, took these powerful crystals, and then he used them within one of the ancient vortexes. So, like all those stone circles, like Stonehenge, they were set up before the seeding of the earth to be ancient transport systems. So you could literally use them during the equinox and they would open automatically without any technology. But the founder of Atlantis had enough of the red crystals that he was able to open these. And so he went into one of the ancient stone circles, as there were a lot that were, obvious back then. And he went through the stone circle and it opened to where Atlantis would be considered today, which was in the Atlantic Ocean. And it was there that he found leftover technology from an earlier group of seeders. So this technology included like the trident, or what you would call the trident, but actually that is a tool that's used a lot, an energy tool that's used a lot on other planetary spheres. And so he found a lot of this ancient technology, and he saw some of the indigenous people, and he decided that since he had very good knowledge of how to build a specific type of city system, that he would use the indigenous population there and create human, like hybrid slaves, and create a system that he knew how to build from where he came from. So this founder had very intricate knowledge of how to build these city systems. And that was one of the reasons why he was chosen to go on the mission to this planetary sphere, Earth. And so he's used the humans, created human hybrid slaves. He had enough technology to do this, for whatever reason. And he then created the systems and the moats and everything like that. And during this time, there were other people that joined him in doing this. And he came across the Sphinx at one point. And what was interesting is, I didn't know this as I was working on the Atlantis material, but the Sphinx was actually built before any of this. The Sphinx was one of the first things to be built before the seeding of the population. So the Sphinx is way older than what people give it credit for. But when this founder of Atlantis came upon the Sphinx, he recognized that it had very special energy. And so the Sphinx became the outpost of Atlantis. It was like where the territory began and where the territory ended.
So are you saying the Sphinx wasn't built by the Egyptians?
Well, according to my research, no, the Sphinx was built by a group of 7 light beings, and they also seem to have come from the Pleiadian star systems, at least the Pleiadians or the Lyrans, because there's a little bit of inconsistency when it comes to the grouping of my hypnosis subjects. But everyone agrees under hypnosis that they did not have bodies. So they were extraterrestrial when they created the Sphinx. What is very consistent is that the Sphinx was built on a very special rock. So this rock seemed to have come almost like an asteroid from a different place, and it embedded itself on the earth. And there are many of these rocks spread out. So there are other Sphinx-like structures, as well as other pyramids located all over, even under the ocean. But the Sphinx was built on this special rock for a very important purpose, like all the other Sphinx-like structures, because this rock, this like special rock, can magnetize, harness, and broadcast information. So the Sphinx acts as almost like a broadcast system, and it's consistently broadcasting everything that's happening here to other places, like other planets. And in return, other information is being broadcast back into the Sphinx. And so it really does act as like this broadcast system. It also broadcasts into the inner earth. It's very quite interesting. That the Sphinx had like a jungle-like cat facade when it was first built. And the reason behind that was these Sphinx-like structures were built kind of like to mimic the apex predator of the area. So they were supposed to people were supposed to question, why does it have this facade? Why does it have this face when they came upon it? And that questioning would lead them to self discovery, was one of the whole purposes behind it. But the Sphinx, throughout hundreds of thousands of years, had many different purposes. I mean, many people remember that they could actually connect, because it is like almost like a radio broadcast system. They could connect with their planets of origin. Sometimes the Sphinx was like a muster point where some Atlantean artifacts were hidden in the Sphinx. The Sphinx contains like scrolls and light codes. And one thing that is interesting is that there have been many things taken from the Sphinx. And when people look under the Sphinx, when my hypnosis subjects look under the Sphinx, they can see that there used to be a ship in the one in Egypt. There used to be a ship that was made with like a pebble like material. And when they locate that, it's miles deep under the Vatican, which is really interesting. And they also can see that they're like urns full of like this white powder that we came to understand was monatomic gold. And underneath the Sphinx leads to tunnels. There's tunnels everywhere. There's tunnels that go from the Sphinx deep down, miles deep, that connect to like many different storage facilities. But a lot of that is taken, and almost all of it is located under the Vatican for some weird reason.
Very interesting. And you know this through hypnosis?
I know this only through hypnosis. I I only use my clients under hypnosis, so I don't know if other people talk about this or not. I have heard someone else mention that there was a ship under the Sphinx, but there are many Sphinx-like structures, and there's a very important Sphinx that's hidden in plain sight in the four corners of the United States. But there's no way I'm allowed to know where that is, and if I did, I would definitely not be allowed to talk about it.
So the confirmation to you is you've asked these unattached people about the same things in the same locations while they're under hypnosis, and they've all said the same thing.
Yes, yeah. When they don't say the same thing, then I make sure to note that. Like, I'm not sure if the Sphinx was built by the Pleiadians or the Lyrans, but I know essentially it's almost as if the Lyrans and Pleiadians are connected. They're the same in a sense.
Someone on here wants to know when they take these crystals out of the ground, does this mean that the area in the earth loses its energy? You
You
were
know,
talking about that.
that's a really good question. Are you talking about the red crystals? Because the red crystals are extremely important. They're so powerful that it would create a certain type of energy if they're buried in the ground. But the red crystals are the ones that are responsible for totally misfiring and blowing up Atlantis. The red crystals have so much power that they could create or destroy an entire civilization. And it's been deemed that humanity cannot handle the power of the red crystals at this moment. And some of the Knights Templar were working in conjunction with Thoth and other star beings to make sure that they've been hidden from humanity until we've reached a point in our evolution where we can safely access them again.
As far as the time frame of when Atlantis was allegedly in existence, was was humanity also happening in other parts of the world, or was this before Earth started to develop, the normal sections of Earth?
So, according to my clients, during the final day, well, Atlantis and Lemuria seemed to coexist at the same time for a little while. But there are so many inconsistencies. So I have never gotten an accurate time period amongst all my hypnosis subjects. So I do not know. And I think the reason for the inconsistencies with the time periods is that time can shift, that there are different timelines. It's almost like the Mandela effect, where some people seem to have been on a different timeline than others. But according to my hypnosis subjects, there were different land masses. So the very early land mass that was the most important was Antarctica. And that's where everyone remembers the early seeding taking place. So when the seeding first began, it was Antarctica and it was very beautiful. And they also remember after Antarctica was seeded came Atlantis, Lemuria, and Avalon. And so there were like four, because Antarctica, according to my clients, seemed to have started getting covered with ice. And then it was more like these four land masses. But I don't have enough consistency to be sure.
And as far as what put an end to it, there's always been lots of rumors through the various documentaries, but you're saying it had something to do with these red crystals.
Yes, according to my clients, what happened was the, the Atlanteans were dealing with a lot of illnesses, or they were having issues with a lot of the experiments that they were doing. They were creating these human hybrids with like animal DNA, and it was really causing a lot of issues in their society. And so, because of their experiments, they were dealing with a lot of backlash and a lot of illnesses, and they were looking for a type of immunity. Now, during this time, Lemuria was also existing. So, Atlantis was going too far with their technology. You hear this story over and over again, and there's a reason for that. And that's because we do the same cycle over and over again, where one group wants to go as far as they can with their technology and one group wants to go as far as they can with their spirituality using nature. It's the same story, and this story just repeats itself in all of history. But during this time, Atlantis was going so far in their technology, while Lemuria was really becoming very advanced in their spirituality, but they didn't have any technology except for the use of crystals and sacred symbols and things like that. They didn't have like ships or anything like that. So during this time, Atlantis was dealing with a lot of illnesses, and they were noticing they knew of the Lemurians because they had technology where they had travel spheres and they could travel all over the place. And they saw that Lemuria had a type of immunity, and they wanted this immunity. And so they made themselves known, and they showed up to the Lemurians, and they demanded and wanted their immunity. But it wasn't something that the Lemurians could actually give them, because they were given these special crystals that created like a vortex of immunity from sickness, from illnesses. And they had no real way of giving this to another group. So when the Atlanteans couldn't get what they wanted, they set off in rifts under the ocean because they had like nuclear devices. I mean, they were super advanced. They set off in rifts under the ocean, nuclear devices that created two massive tidal waves. And many people remember this giant wave that just destroyed and sunk the entire population of Lemuria. It looked like two giant waves coming from different sides of the continent, and just in like a twirling motion just took everything. And they were so big because they were using these atomic like devices that that island is now sunk and just destroyed completely at the bottom of the ocean. But they took one person as a prisoner, and she spent about 60 years in a prison in Atlantis. And that was my first client going into Atlantis. And that's how I learned so much about Atlantis. I didn't really honestly believe it at first because I thought, what a great story. But then I saw so many weird coincidences happen around me. And so basically, in a nutshell, what happened and how I got into Atlantis and Lemuria in the first place was I wanted to take this level 3 class, the QHHT class, and I needed someone to regress on the spot. Like, I needed someone to videotape to take to my class. And so I just wanted to ask one of my friends, a volunteer, and not like a paying client. So I asked my friend, who I've been friends with for over 10 years, if she wouldn't mind being regressed and wouldn't mind me taking her video submission to the class. And I told her exactly what I was doing. I said, this is like Dolores Cannon's method. Essentially, you'll be able to find out anything, and you can even heal yourself. And I knew my friend did not believe in any of this stuff because I knew her for 10 years, and I knew she didn't know anything about Atlantis. In fact, she didn't even believe in it. And I knew she didn't believe in extraterrestrials. And so she agreed to be my hypnosis subject because my friend that who I asked was suffering from this brain condition, and it's called pseudotumor cerebri. And basically, there was like flooding of her spinal fluid in her brain. And she said, I will definitely be your hypnosis subject. Sure, I will try anything, because she was working really closely with this team of specialists at the University of Miami, and they told her there's no cure for this. So she said, I will do whatever. I'll be your hypnosis subject. So in our first session, she recounts memories of this ancient civilization in this place we came to understand as Lemuria. Now, she didn't call it Lemuria, she called it Amun. And we came to understand it was Lemuria through working together multiple times. So she remembered the tidal wave. She remembered being taken, captured, and she remembered spending 60 years in this really advanced place. And so that is how I got into this whole information. And I didn't really believe this was important information. I thought it was just a good story. But my friend's brain condition healed. My friend, under hypnosis, her higher self said that we needed to share this information with the world, that I needed to write it down. I needed to put it into a book. And I still didn't believe it. I just thought, oh, this is, just interesting material. But I started to finally believe this when other clients that didn't know one another started showing up for their sessions, and they started recounting similar time periods. Like they would remember Atlantis or Lemuria, or, things that I was working on with my friend. And every time the higher self kept saying, you need to write this down. People have been waiting for this information. The higher self kept telling me that people were waiting for this information for thousands and thousands of years, that it was so important that it would create change amongst the people, that some people had just incarnated just to like rebalance their karma from this lifetime. So essentially, what I came to fully understand, what I believe, is that most of us walking the planet today are reincarnations from Atlantis or Lemuria. And we're here because after civilizations like that pass suddenly, there's so much trauma, so much karma to account for. So when you think about that, there needs to be a way to rebalance the karma, to give people another chance to do things differently. So most of us chose this time period because we're reaching a point in our evolution where we're reaching the same places. And so much of what's happening around us is triggering our memories, because so much of what is happening happened back then, just a little bit different. So we get this opportunity to really release this karma, do things differently. And the one thing that's so important for everyone to do if they are part of this group is to listen to themselves, like to follow their inner guidance and not the guidance that's being forced to them. And that's like the most important thing that we came to do differently, according to my hypnosis subjects.
Now you do tours of Egypt, which here's a couple pictures. You do this regularly. This seems pretty cool. What happens on these tours that you take these people on? I notice your next one in September is sold out, so they're very popular.
Yeah, they usually sell out in like less than 2 hours. I feel really lucky that I get to do this. But essentially, what makes our tour different is that we always um, hypnotize everyone in the sacred sites. So we have private access. We stay at all the first class hotels, and we do, or I do, share whatever I've received from my hypnosis clients under hypnosis about what to do in these places, or what was done, what initiatory practices were done, and what you can do, in these sacred places to really maximize your experience, but also to give people the opportunity to experience that for themselves. So there's a lot of meditating, guided meditations in these sacred places to really tap into these places. Because what a lot of people don't really understand is a lot of things have been kind of tampered with in these sacred places, but it doesn't matter. You can still access this information because essentially, coming through any of these sacred sites, there are light codes, and the reason behind that is these sacred sites are built on vortexes and energy lines, and they're all built like that for a reason. They're built to harness and hold this energy, and so anybody can tap into that. And by quieting your mind in these places, it really allows you to access it yourself. Because it's one thing to go take a trip to Egypt and hear all the amazing information, but it's such a different trip when you go to actually regain pieces of yourself. And I think that's what a lot of people miss when they go to a lot of these sacred sites. They miss actually regaining themselves, because when you go to a place like Egypt, you see all these like hieroglyphs and all these symbols, and it looks like they're clues and they're trying to like show you something, and it's almost like you're looking for something and you can't figure out what it is. Well, what you're actually looking for is yourself. You are the key that unlocks everything in these sacred places, because what happens is these sacred places work with you. They work with your own crown chakra, and you download the information from these places into your chakra, into your crown chakra. They're built on energy lines for that. These temples were built so that if the generation lost like all the knowledge, the temples would hold the knowledge. The temples still hold the knowledge. They're in the walls, and you can tap into them just by like using your own mind, your own quieting your mind, just tuning in to these sacred places, because the temples are almost like they have a consciousness and they're waiting for you, and it's you that unlocks all this information. So I love taking people to Egypt, and yes, they sell out so fast, but it's really been an amazing experience. I love watching people's faces as they figure out for themselves, who they really are and what they're doing there, because each group is formed for a reason, and it's so fun to watch.
How long do these tours last? Is it about a week, or what goes on other than the meditations? What's involved in these tours?
Well, we go to all the sacred sites. We go to the Sphinx. We go, to all the pyramids. We go in the pyramids, but they're special because we have private entry, and they last 12 days. We have two tours. So we have one that goes down the Nile, and one that's a land only, like goes by bus to the places. It depends on what people prefer.
What's the coolest thing you've experienced over there in Egypt?
Oh my God. Last trip, last May, we had like one wife brought her husband along, and he really didn't want to be there. He was just like coming there because she sort of forced him. And we were in one of the pyramids, and all of a sudden he just went down to the floor, and he just looked spellbound, like he had received some sort of amazing message, and he's been changed ever since. He's now like always talking about different information he's received on the WhatsApp group that we formed. And I just love that. I love that it really opened his eyes and changed his life. Honestly, it's so rewarding to me to see that.
You mentioned earlier the client that had been in the Atlantis jail for 60 years, according to what
Yeah.
you said, under hypnosis, had a brain issue fixed by going through these regressions with you. What are some of the actual physical and medical healings that have occurred in your work like that?
Healing these days is so easy, actually, and people heal themselves all the time. But just so you know, there's nothing special like about me, so people don't have to see me to experience healing. Anybody can experience this. Essentially, our bodies are messengers. So when you're really quieting your mind and tuning into yourself, you can find out exactly what is going on with your body. Like you can find out what the very root cause of an issue is. And essentially, the body is just sending you a message. So once you get to the root cause of the message or the issue or the illness or what the purpose is, and you always have to learn something. So a lot of times you'll get a issue with your body because there's something you need to learn. There's something you're not addressing, and so it's forced upon you through this issue or illness. Once you get this message, you understand the purpose, you understand what you needed to learn, then it can be released and healed, because if you think about the body as a messenger, you no longer need the message. So that is one of the reasons why people are healing themselves all the time. And healing can happen spontaneously yourself. You don't even need hypnosis. When you wake up in the morning and you can still remember your dream, in that state, that's a deep theta state. So if you use that state and just try to prolong that state and sit in that state, you can ask yourself, if you have any issues going on, what is the very root cause of this issue? What is the purpose? What is the lesson? What exactly do I have to do about this physical issue? And just listen. Just stay in that state. Just listen. And you'll know when you get the answer, because it'll feel like this huge, like, aha moment. When you get that, you're healed. You'll know, because when people experience this type of spontaneously healing themselves in these sessions, it feels like that. It's like, oh, I got the message, and then it's gone.
Now, you've written numerous books. One of them is From the Trail to the Star People. Who are the Star People?
Oh my gosh, the star people are us. They're just us in a different timeline. It's really, really quite fascinating. But I always thought star people were other, or they were other beings. They're coming, well, some are, but the majority of star people are just us, another version of ourselves. Because if you think about time, it doesn't exist in the rest of the universe. So the rest of the other higher level versions of ourselves understand this better than we can really comprehend. But everything is happening in this now moment. Even really Atlantis and Lemuria, and I know that's complicated, but it is sort of happening in this now moment. And so since everything is happening in this now moment, if you think about your past lives, there's also future lives, there's other versions of yourself every single time you make a different decision. So these other versions of ourselves that are much more advanced, that have lived like hundreds of thousands of years in the future of you, sometimes would consider themselves extraterrestrial. Are often the ones that are contacting you. And they're contacting you a lot of the time to help you to regulate your body. But I've noticed that there's different telltale signs with each person according to what lineage or what kind of information or star system they're projecting. It's really general, but I've noticed this trend coming through my hypnosis clients. So a lot of the time, if you have like lighter colored eyes or even darker eyes, but you can see a little crown, like a little like orange yellow crown around the pupil, that's usually a telltale sign that your eyes are projecting information from the Pleiadian star system, or you're sort of like in alignment with that version of yourself. So your iris holds the blueprint of your soul. All the rings and the lines in your iris show where your soul have been or what information you're projecting. Just like color therapy is a thing, your eyes are projecting information. And so essentially what happens is when you meet another soul, your soul is projecting information from whatever star system to their soul. So in general, if you have brown eyes, like I have brown eyes, it's usually a telltale sign that you've been reincarnating on this earth plane for a very long time. They would be considered like ancient souls, or carrying that wisdom that would be downloaded into another person's soul when they would come in contact with someone with very deep brown eyes, because mine are very deep. And then if you have green eyes, a lot of times in general, they're projecting information from Lyra. And what's interesting about people that have any little bit of green in their eyes, a lot of times they have a lot of trouble with technology, even if it's like a little ring. And the reason is because they're broadcasting information through themselves, it's such a different frequency that it has a hard time translating into our frequency, and so they can sometimes destroy your computer, which I learned the hard way. And then if you have like blue eyes, like no color in your blue eyes, a lot of times it's a sign you come from one of the water planets. And then if you have like any gold or, well, yellow, not gold, yellow in your eyes, it's a lot of times a sign that you're projecting information from Andromeda. And then, even different birthmarks, or if you have like a triangle shaped birthmark that just all of a sudden appears after a nap, that's usually like a telltale sign you're part of like an intergalactic space program. And when I say it shows up as like a sign, it might look like freckles in a triangle like pattern. A lot of times if you have freckles or birthmarks or anything in the shape of like a straight line, like three dots in a row, that's like a really good sign that you're being contacted or projecting or communicating a lot with beings or other versions from the Orion star system. And it is so obvious because it looks like Orion, just like the triangle looks like a triangle. So we come into these lifetimes with clues for ourselves because essentially we're trying to wake ourselves up, but wake ourselves up slowly usually. And so we have these clues that we see, that we think to ourselves and we start to question, that's really weird that I have this kind of symbol in my body, or that's, what do my eyes mean? Or, even our blood types mean something. So all these things are clues because we're really all intergalactic beings. So we are all, extraterrestrial in a sense. We just came here for this experiment. The original humans are Sasquatch, and they were the ones that are less touched by extraterrestrials or other versions for this experiment are not like us. We are very extraterrestrial. We are like hybrids, all of us. And so even our blood types hold clues. Like people with the O blood type in general, the O blood type is very special because in general, people with that blood type often store very deep memories of like Atlantis, Lemuria, and Egypt, ancient Egypt. So they can reactivate their DNA because essentially we're trying to reactivate, awaken, and our DNA starts to awaken at some places around the globe, even. So a person with like the O blood type, if they went to like Egypt and they touched one of those megalithic structures that's very, very old, this can actually activate their DNA. And it's something that I share with people that come to Egypt. But if you have like the A blood type, a lot of times you can reactivate your DNA if you go to some of these Norse like places like Glastonbury. And a lot of people with the A blood type store within them like information from like even the Druids. They might even be reincarnated from the Druids. And one telltale sign that you are a reincarnation of something like that with the A blood type especially is you might have anemia. Anemia is like such a big clue that you're a reincarnation from Druid or even from like the fairies because the fairies and the druids could not handle iron in their body. And it's sort of like a subconscious clue that we bring forward to almost like trigger our memories. So essentially, what you could do if you have anemia or issues with anemia is you can work with honey, like the ancient people of that time used to do, or you can go to Glastonbury. In Glastonbury, there's this place called the Chalice Well and has minerals in it that no one's really studied yet, how these minerals really can help people heal. But you can drink out of this chalice well and actually can really help and activate your DNA as well as just putting your hands on some of the megalithic structures there. But if you have the B blood type, a lot of times you store deep memories from Lemuria or some of the Pacific islands there. And a lot of people with the B blood type can really tune into nature like they could there. And it's almost like your ancestors, yes, sure, they carried trauma, but they also carried abilities and wisdom. So if you use your blood type and your eye color as clues, you can activate and like harness some of this ancient wisdom that we're starting to relearn. And oh yeah, Rh negative blood is really interesting because comes with like a characteristic of more leadership actually. So a lot of people with the Rh negative blood and red hair were the pharaohs. They used to have Rh negative blood, red hair, and astigmatism because astigmatism disguised as a disability, but actually comes from an ancient ability to see into different dimensions. The eye shape's just different. And so the Rh negative blood people actually were considered the gift of the stars, geared towards leadership, which is really interesting. And then AB blood type is really interesting too because people with AB blood type are in general just very geared towards becoming like a spiritual master because AB blood type people are usually in general very balanced. They have the A and the B, but like there's so many different things like that I learn in these hypnosis sessions that I find so fascinating. I never thought this was a thing. I really didn't even believe it until so many of my clients started talking about it. Oh, and if you have little flecks in your eyes, like little like flecks of light, a lot of times that's because you're projecting information from Arcturus or like hazel-ish eyes. So it's all quite fascinating to me. I mean, there's so many things to learn.
Now, this might be too much of a complicated question, but you're talking about reincarnation a lot, and obviously there's some time periods in between being reincarnated and the various existences. What happens when you die in your own personal theory?
Oh, yeah. Well, from what my clients have said, the body feels exhilarated right before death. So, what happens is right before you're about to die, there's like a feeling of euphoria. And it feels so good. And then all of a sudden, you are popped out of your body, like when you fully die. And then you notice the lack of body, and that feels like a huge relief. So it's like you can still see, hear, experience everything, but you see in all directions. So, like many of my clients, when they first die and they talk about it, they're like, I can think about the sink and go to the sink while being over here. So it's really interesting because we see with our eyes facing this way. When you die, you see everything. You can like, it's different. And you can be in multiple places at once. It's really, really different. So usually right upon death, you're greeted by some of your pets, which are usually the first ones to greet you, and then family members, your higher self, your spirit team, and in general, usually would go into a resting area if you had any trauma in your life, or you would go review your life. But most people have to be cleansed from this human life because it's so hard. And then they would go into the review. And then once you go through the review, you can actually take classes over there. So you can decide what it is you want to learn. The classes are usually based on what it is that you want to learn. So the learning is much better apparently here because it's one thing to be on the other side and learn, but this is like where you practice, where you actually learn because your soul can grow so much more when you're physically incarnated than it can on the other side. You still experience growth, but not as much as you do here. And yes, the time periods, reincarnation is really an interesting thing because I did not understand this at all. I always understood it as you're born, you have a life, you die, you go into another life. But the higher self has said it's not at all like that. It's like they say I go like this, but they told me turn my hand out and go like that. It's almost like the lines on a record, they're all there. So he told me, think of it all out in front of me. Like everything is happening right now, but you're physically focused on this one experience. But your soul, to maximize the experience, goes into all different directions. It's like your soul is in all different places, but you're having a full experience as you. You're focused on this experience, but you're also having another experience somewhere else. I don't know if that makes sense. I know it took me a while to figure that out.
Yeah, I may have to watch this a few times to fully comprehend everything you're saying. The last question I'll throw in here from a fan is time travel possible?
Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. Time travel has been possible. It is possible. It's actually used right now. People do use time travel. There's subsets of the government that's already used it, or using it through reverse engineering extraterrestrial crafts. Time travel is very possible because essentially it's hard to explain like how they explain this to me, but essentially you can focus a different location into the consciousness of an object. You can also it's really complicated, but you can also manipulate your own DNA and put yourself somewhere else. But yes, it's very, you could do it yourself if you knew how. I don't know how, but I know there's people that do. People that do.
Very good answer. Now you got three books, one on the secrets of the Sphinx, a hypnotist journey to Atlantis, which you've been talking about Atlantis a lot, and the one we already talked about, From the Trail to the Star People. These are available on Amazon, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have any others you're working on that are coming out anytime soon?
Yes, I'm almost done with my fourth book. I'm hoping it's done in a couple months because there's just so much information, so much material. Because, like I said, I love what I do. I'm bombarded with all this information and I want to get it all out there because I feel like I'm a messenger, like I want to share this information because it's so profound and so helpful. And so I'm trying to get out as fast as I can because I don't write these books. I'm literally just transcribing it. So I'm taking it from my clients under hypnosis and I'm hoping that it's out like at least by June.
I almost feel you're secretly hypnotizing me
How'd
because
you
your light
know?
keeps changing in the background.
I
I don't
am
know if
not
that's on
doing
purpose
that.
or not.
No, I am not doing that. I don't know why it's doing that. Like it's literally plugged in and it's been flickering.
Yeah,
See,
I don't.
this
I
is
I
so
wasn't
much
sure.
weird stuff happens to me all the time. Like I know I'm always being watched, like always. It's the weirdest thing.
So where can the fans follow you? I'll put up your website again, but if they want to know more information about you.
They can go to my website, theholistichupnotist.com, and I don't have any private sessions available for the next 2 years because they book up so fast. But I I started offering these 3-day in-person workshops, which people have just been loving. I mean, people are definitely healing themselves, and you can see the testimonials from some people that have come. But I really enjoy doing these 3-day workshops because other people get to meet one another and they get to experience past life regressions and other really amazing healing modalities. So I have two available. One of them's almost sold out, but I have one in the Florida Keys that'll be in August. But you can find out under Book a Workshop. So I hope to see everybody there.
Plus, you're going to be at Contact in the
Yes.
Desert coming up, right? What are you going to be doing there? A
Oh, I'm so
lecture or something?
excited. Yes, I'm going to be sharing actual um, film of some of my clients deep under hypnosis when extraterrestrials have come through. So I'm going to be sharing what the extraterrestrials have said, and by showing actual clips. Because it's one thing for me to talk all day long, but it's another to actually see what I'm talking about. And I'm going to also be teaching a workshop how to tap into the quantum field using self hypnosis techniques, which I use all the time. So I'm going to be teaching the workshop. I think it's Sunday, and also sharing information that I've learned in my sessions.
That sounds like it's going to be a great convention or whatever you want to call it. So many stars from the UFO industry are going to be there, and you're going to be there. So I really appreciate your time. This has been very interesting. I've enjoyed it. I'll let you close this off with whatever message you want to give the viewers.
Oh, thank you. Well, I would say the most important thing that anyone can do, and this is what comes through my sessions all the time, is if you want to really help, like, the world, help humanity, help everything, that the best thing you can really do is to master yourself. Because when you do, you change and shift all timelines, you heal your ancestors. And essentially, when you master yourself or become a spiritual master, you leave a permanent imprint in the consciousness, and anybody can tap into that. So it's one of the best, most efficient, best things you can do is to do the inner work. And that's why I started having these workshops so people could actually do that. And I show them and lead them into the inner work with me.